Pakistan stands at a critical juncture, its very existence strained by a confluence of crises that intertwine identity, governance, human rights, and development into a singular existential challenge. The nation is deeply wounded, its social fabric frayed by the erosion of democratic values, the rise of authoritarianism, intensifying ethnic and sectarian divisions, the weaponization of religion, and the exploitation of natural resources without equitable development. Every institution, every layer of society seems to be simultaneously eroding and cannibalizing itself, leaving behind not a failing state, but a profoundly injured nation struggling to find a coherent path forward. Yet, amid this turmoil, there persists a desperate yearning among segments of the youth, intellectuals, and marginalized communities to reclaim a vision of Pakistan that could have been a nation rooted in justice, equality, progress, and human dignity. This yearning, though fragile, is the ember of hope that could ignite transformative renewal if nurtured with courage, clarity, and collective action. The death of democracy in Pakistan was not a sudden event, but a gradual, deliberate strangulation. Over decades, an unholy alliance of the political elite, military establishment, and judiciary systematically dismantled the democratic spirit that the nation's founders sought to nurture. Elections, once a hopeful exercise in civic participation, have become heavily managed spectacles, with outcomes often predetermined by powerful interests. Dissenting voices, whether from politicians, journalists, or ordinary citizens, are silenced through censorship, intimidation, or violence. State institutions designed to serve as checks and balances have been reduced to ceremonial rubber stamps, their independence compromised by political and military interference. Internationally, Pakistan's ranking on democracy indices, such as those by Freedom House and the Economist Intelligence Unit, has plummeted, reflecting its slide toward authoritarianism. Yet, domestically, the state maintains a manufactured illusion of democracy, with carefully curated narratives deceiving many into believing the country remains on a legitimate democratic path. This cognitive dissonance between the reality of authoritarian control and the spectacle of democratic processes forms one of the most tragic elements of Pakistan's contemporary history, eroding public trust and fostering cynicism about political change. Speaking truth to power in Pakistan is an act of extraordinary courage, often met with devastating consequences. The public sphere, particularly digital spaces, is haunted by the constant threat of retribution for criticizing the state or its sacred institutions, such as the military or religious establishment. Journalists, academics, activists, and even ordinary citizens face character assassination, imprisonment, enforced disappearances, or death for daring to challenge the status quo. Even moderate critiques, carefully worded to avoid offense, can trigger organized smear campaigns, accusations of treason, or societal ostracization. The consequences of this systemic intimidation are profound. A chilling effect has settled over society, stifling not only free speech, but also the critical thought necessary for intellectual and moral progress. When questioning authority becomes synonymous with betrayal, a nation loses its ability to self-correct, condemning itself to repeat its mistakes endlessly. The stories of those who paid the ultimate price, journalists like Arshad Sharif, activists like Sabine Mahmood, and countless others, serve as grim reminders of the cost of truth in a society where dissent is equated with disloyalty. Oppression in Pakistan is deeply layered and intersectional, affecting ethnic minorities, religious minorities, women, and the poor in overlapping and compounding ways. Being Baloch, Pashtun, Sindhi, Christian, Hindu, or a woman often means navigating a parallel reality where constitutional rights are theoretical at best and deadly traps at worst. Ethnic minorities face systemic marginalization, with regions like Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa treated as peripheral zones of neglect or repression. Religious minorities live under constant threat of violence or discrimination, their places of worship and communities targeted with impunity. Women, despite rhetorical tributes to their honor, face domestic violence, economic exclusion, political marginalization, and cultural norms that normalize their subordination. The poor, regardless of other identities, bear the brunt of an economic system rigged against them, with access to education, healthcare, and justice remaining elusive. These intersecting forms of oppression create multiple Pakistans within the same geographical boundaries, some privileged and protected, others brutalized and dispossessed. The state's reluctance to confront this internal apartheid structure is a glaring contradiction, especially as it demands international sympathy for issues like Kashmir, while replicating similar, if not worse, systems of oppression within its own borders. This failure to uphold constitutional promises of equality undermines national unity and fuels resentment among marginalized groups. The rise of mob justice is a chilling symptom of a society losing its collective sanity. High-profile lynchings over blasphemy allegations, such as the murder of Mashal Khan in 2017, and everyday violence against marginalized communities reflect a deep-seated moral crisis. These acts have roots in the state's deliberate Islamization policies of the 1980s under General Zia-ul-Haq, which empowered religious extremists and entrenched a culture of intolerance. Today, groups like the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, TLP, which enforce their version of religious orthodoxy through terror, are treated with leniency, often negotiated with rather than prosecuted. In stark contrast, peaceful movements demanding human rights, such as the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, PTM, or Balak rights protests, are crushed with brutal efficiency. This grotesque irony reveals a state more terrified of unarmed activists than bloodthirsty mobs, undermining the rule of law and emboldening vigilante violence. The normalization of such violence has dehumanized Pakistani society, eroding empathy and fostering a climate of fear and retribution. Pakistan's media operates as a powerful machinery of distraction, manufacturing hysteria to divert attention from domestic failures. During episodes of heightened Indo-Pak tensions, such as the 2019 Pulwama attack, the media glorifies war as the ultimate expression of patriotism, with little regard for the catastrophic consequences of nuclear escalation. Triumphant hashtags, hyper-masculine posturing, and a grotesque celebration of military power dominate public discourse, airbrushing the real costs of conflict, economic devastation, loss of human life, and diplomatic isolation. This endless jingoism serves as a convenient tool for the state, keeping the population locked in a cycle of manufactured outrage and false pride. Complex issues, such as economic inequality or institutional decay, are sidelined in favor of simplistic narratives that pit Pakistan against external enemies. The media's complicity, whether through state pressure or profit-driven sensationalism, has eroded its role as a guardian of truth, leaving citizens ill-equipped to engage with their nation's challenges. Despite official claims that terrorism has been neutralized, it continues to plague Pakistan, particularly in marginalized regions like Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The tribal areas remain war zones where ordinary civilians bear the heaviest toll of violence. The state's selective outrage is stark. Terrorist attacks in privileged urban centers like Lahore or Islamabad are treated as national tragedies, while those in rural or peripheral areas are reduced to footnotes. This disparity reflects a broader bias toward urban elites, further alienating marginalized communities. Pakistan's history of selectively nurturing extremist groups for strategic depth, particularly in Afghanistan, continues to haunt it. The toxic ecosystem of ideological extremism and opportunistic violence thrives unchecked, fueled by state ambivalence and societal polarization. Addressing terrorism requires not only military action, but also a reckoning with the ideological and political failures that sustain it, including the state's role in fostering extremism. In Pakistan's post-truth society, narratives solidify along predictable lines, with facts deemed irrelevant. Patriotism is measured by how unquestioningly one parrots the official line, and dissent is framed as active treason deserving of severe punishment. This toxic political culture, evident in the aftermath of incidents like Pulwama, stunts intellectual and moral growth, locking the nation in a cycle of self-inflicted wounds. The inability to engage with verifiable realities, whether about terrorism, governance, or foreign policy, prevents Pakistan from learning from its mistakes or charting a coherent path forward. Pakistan is plagued by chronic elitism, corruption, and institutional decay. The judiciary, meant to be the guardian of constitutional rights, has often been complicit in enabling authoritarianism, from the infamous doctrine of necessity to recent verdicts steeped in political bias. Civil society, once a vibrant space for debate and activism, has been depoliticized, co-opted, or suppressed into irrelevance. The state's authority is routinely undermined by tribal, feudal, and ethnic allegiances that take precedence over national unity. In many regions, parallel systems of governance, based on clan loyalty, religious edicts, or brute force, operate with impunity, perpetuating practices like honor killings, forced conversions, bonded labor, and vigilante justice. The ruling elite, shielded by privilege, has historically refused to invest in institution building, preferring personal patronage networks that ensure their dominance. This entrenched elitism has created a society where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority navigate a system rigged against them, where the rule of law is the exception, not the norm. Water scarcity represents a looming catastrophe, with implications for both environmental sustainability and geopolitical stability. The Indus Waters Treaty, once a triumph of diplomacy, is under strain as India leverages water as a strategic tool. Pakistan's own water management is a story of criminal negligence, with provinces like Sindh facing existential threats due to dwindling supplies. Intrastate disputes over water allocation mirror the broader crisis of governance, where trust deficits and zero-sum thinking prevent cooperative solutions. Natural resource exploitation, particularly in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, is another tragic missed opportunity. These regions sit atop mineral wealth that could transform Pakistan's economy, yet the benefits overwhelmingly flow to external corporations, military-linked businesses, and federal elites. Local communities are left with environmental degradation, displacement, and cultural erosion, treated as obstacles rather than stakeholders. This extractive economy fuels resentment and strengthens separatist sentiments, further destabilizing the nation. Social media, initially hailed as a democratizing force, has become a playground for misinformation, polarization, and mob behavior. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement amplify outrage, reducing complex issues to trending hashtags and shallow performative activism. Pakistan has consistently ignored the lessons of nations that rebuilt themselves after devastation. Countries like South Korea, Vietnam, and Japan transformed through structural reforms, investments in education, and a focus on human capital. They confronted internal contradictions, embraced change, and prioritized development over victimhood. Pakistan, by contrast, remains trapped in a self-pitying narrative, refusing to take ownership of its failures or undertake the painful reforms necessary for survival. This refusal to learn from history condemns Pakistan to repeat it, perpetuating cycles of stagnation and crisis. The education system lies at the heart of Pakistan's intellectual and moral collapse. In other countries, schools are designed to kill curiosity, punish independent thought, and instill blind conformity through rote memorization, ideological indoctrination, and fear-based discipline. In Pakistan, textbooks glorify wars, whitewash injustices, and propagate historical myths, stifling critical engagement with reality. Universities, rather than fostering dissent and innovation, churn out ideologically compliant, unemployable graduates. Student unions, once powerful engines of political engagement, have been systematically dismantled, leaving campuses depoliticized and docile. This educational failure produces generations ill-equipped to question authority or navigate a complex world. Without a revolution in education, emphasizing critical thinking, creativity, and civic engagement, Pakistan cannot hope to build a society capable of addressing its challenges or seizing its opportunities. Pakistan's creeping centralization of power, particularly the undermining of the 18th Amendment, poses existential risks to its fragile federalism. Attempts to seize control over provincial resources and policymaking exacerbate ethnic grievances, sowing seeds of future conflicts. The lessons of East Pakistan's secession in 1971 remain unlearned, as the state prioritizes force over trust and equity. True national integration requires genuine devolution of power, equitable resource sharing, and respect for regional diversity, principles that remain elusive in Pakistan's governance model. Addressing Pakistan's multifaceted crisis demands a radical shift toward clarity in defining what Pakistan is, what its people aspire to, and what values will guide its future. Civil resistance, rooted in intellectual nonviolent confrontation, is the only sustainable path forward. Violent revolutions risk reproducing cycles of repression, but persistent, principled resistance through protests, advocacy, and public discourse can drive systemic change. Ending the culture of infantilized political discourse, marked by memes, slogans, and performative outrage, is equally critical. Citizens must learn to engage with complex ideas, debate differences with civility, and demand accountability without succumbing to demagoguery. Cultivating a mature, resilient civic culture is the foundation of sustainable democracy. Rebuilding Pakistan requires breaking free from tribal loyalties, sectarian identities, and patronage networks. The nation must invest in institutions rather than personalities, prioritizing the rule of law, transparency, and meritocracy. The judiciary must be depoliticized, insulated from military and executive influence, and committed to upholding constitutional rights. The bureaucracy, plagued by inertia and corruption, needs reform to become responsive and efficient. Strengthening institutions ensures that governance serves the public, not the elite. Corruption in Pakistan is not merely a financial crime but a moral and existential one, robbing the poor to enrich the powerful. Every misappropriated rupee represents a classroom unbuilt, a hospital underfunded, or a village without clean water. Treating corruption as a national emergency requires relentless institutional action. Independent anti-corruption bodies, transparent procurement, and prosecution without favoritism. Public awareness campaigns and whistleblower protections can empower citizens to hold the powerful accountable. The military's pervasive role in civilian affairs remains a core obstacle to democracy. While the military deserves respect for defending territorial integrity, its interference in governance, media, and business distorts markets, deepens inequality, and undermines political freedom. Civilian supremacy is not an attack on the military, but a framework for true national security, encompassing economic stability, human dignity, and political rights. Rebalancing civil-military relations requires constitutional reforms, public support, and a cultural shift toward valuing democratic governance. Empowering women, youth, and minorities is non-negotiable. Women face systemic barriers, violence, economic exclusion, political marginalization, that demand a cultural revolution redefining honor as the advancement of women's rights. The youth, a demographic majority, risk alienation without education, jobs, and civic engagement, but could lead transformation if given real stakes in shaping the future. Minorities face sectarian violence and discrimination, necessitating legal reforms, curriculum changes, and a societal commitment to pluralism. Education must be the cornerstone of renewal, not merely expanding literacy, but transforming how knowledge is produced and shared. Schools and universities should foster critical thinking, creativity, and citizenship, replacing rote memorization with inquiry-based learning. Reviving student unions can rekindle political engagement, while public libraries and online platforms can democratize access to knowledge. Economic transformation must prioritize inclusion and sustainability. Growth that exacerbates inequality or destroys the environment is self-defeating. Land reforms, progressive taxation, universal healthcare, and education can reduce staggering inequality. Small and medium enterprises, women entrepreneurs, and green technologies should drive growth, creating jobs and opportunities for the marginalized. A just economy ensures that prosperity is shared, fostering stability and social cohesion. Environmental degradation, deforestation, pollution, climate change poses an existential threat. Pakistan is among the world's most climate-vulnerable nations, yet its policies remain inadequate. Mainstreaming environmental justice requires linking it to social and economic equity, investing in renewable energy, modernizing agriculture, and promoting conservation. Protecting forests, rivers, and biodiversity is a matter of survival, demanding a national ethos of stewardship. Social justice must move from rhetoric to reality. Ending discrimination based on gender, religion, ethnicity, or class is a moral and practical necessity for national unity. Laws must be enforced impartially and social norms challenged when they perpetuate oppression. A pluralistic national identity, celebrating linguistic, cultural, and religious diversity, can bridge divides and foster cohesion. Pakistan's foreign policy must shift from militaristic posturing to diplomacy, trade, and regional cooperation. Engaging neighbors through cultural exchange and conflict resolution strengthens national interests in a globalized world. Cultural diplomacy, promoting Pakistan's arts, literature, and heritage, can challenge stereotypes and enhance soft power. Multilateral engagement on climate change, public health, and migration is essential for Pakistan's global standing. Technology offers tools for transparency, education, and empowerment, but risks surveillance and disinformation without regulation. A progressive tech policy should bridge digital divides, promote literacy, and protect rights. Supporting tech startups, simplifying regulations, and fostering academia-industry collaboration can position Pakistan as a regional innovation hub. The arts and humanities are vital for societal renewal, fostering critical thought and national pride. Public funding, educational reforms, and platforms for artists can revitalize cultural production, challenging oppressive narratives and celebrating diversity. With one of the world's youngest populations, Pakistan's future hinges on its youth. Marginalized and disillusioned, they risk radicalization without opportunities. Investing in education, entrepreneurship, and civic engagement can transform them into a vanguard of innovation and justice. Their voices must shape policy, and their energy must build institutions. Women must be recognized as leaders of development, not mere beneficiaries. Gender equality requires weaving women's rights into every policy: education, employment, politics, and justice. Dismantling barriers like violence and economic dependency empowers women to drive social and economic progress, strengthening the nation. Despite the scale of Pakistan's challenges, hope endures through the resilience of its people. Countless Pakistanis, youth, activists, artists, educators, continue to fight for justice, dignity, and a better future. Their struggles and sacrifices keep the soul of Pakistan alive. Individual awakening, refusing propaganda, and embracing truth is the spark for collective consciousness. In a society where conformity is rewarded and questioning punished, independent thought becomes revolutionary. Collective action, grounded in a disciplined hope, can drive systemic change. Every citizen has a role: policymakers crafting reforms, educators inspiring minds, entrepreneurs building opportunities, and artists telling stories of resilience. The call to action is clear. Pakistan must rise, act, and believe in its potential. The work of nation building is never finished, demanding continuous reflection and renewal. Education, democracy, economic inclusion, social justice, environmental stewardship, global engagement, technology, youth, women, arts, and hope must be the pillars of this renewal. The road is long, filled with obstacles, but with commitment to justice, equity, and human dignity, Pakistan can build a future worthy of its people's dreams and sacrifices. The time to begin is now, with every individual, community, and institution rising to meet the challenge of reimagining and rebuilding a nation that lives up to its promise.